freedoms. And with that, I yield back, and I thank the gentle lady.
Thank you so much, Representative. Your leadership has really made a difference, and appreciate your comments. And I know another colleague from Texas who is a captain in the Army, probably has a few things to share about this. So I'd like to hear from my friend Louis Gohmert.
And I thank my friend from Missouri for yielding and for setting up this time that we could share about what's going on. And just in contrast to my friend from Louisiana's examples of the abuses of military members' First Amendment rights, that a government is not supposed to prohibit the free exercise of religion. Well, of course we know in the military. I knew that there's some things you give up when you're in the military. You can't assemble when you want to. You can't speak when you want to. But commanders-in-chief have always known that when it came to religious liberty, you should not infringe upon people's religious beliefs, especially when they believed they were fighting for a country where people could have First Amendment rights to utilize and to worship God. And in fact, of course, my 4 years in the Army, we didn't have a commander-in-chief that had issued an order attributed to George Washington that people should not take the name of the Lord in vain, because how can we ask God's blessing on our military at the same time the same mouth is taking God's name in vain? That was not the order of the day when I was in the Army. But by the same token, you saw crosses at chapels on military installations. You saw crosses inside of chapels, outside of chapels, and now they've been removed, we've been told, from inside and outside of chapels on military installations. It's outrageous. We hear people call the generation in America that won World War II, making the world safer for democracy, the greatest generation. Yet if you look at what occurred during World War II, you had a president of the United States that went on national radio on D-Day and prayed about the evil forces that our troops were trying to defeat. He prayed God's blessing openly for several minutes on national radio. And I was given by my aunt a New Testament with a metal cover, and there are all kinds of stories about these metal covers actually stopping bullets when they were placed in pockets. But this, on the metal cover, it says, "May the Lord be with you." Well, under the new rules, this administration, and even though I haven't seen anything that this commander-in-chief has signed or said, you can't practice your Christian beliefs, we're not going to afford you conscience exemptions like have always been provided throughout our country. I haven't seen that, but as Harry Truman said, the buck stops with the commander-in-chief. And whether it's actually stopping with Valerie Jarrett or wherever it's stopping, the commander-in-chief has the power to get the buck, bring it to his desk, and make these decisions. Well, here is what Franklin D. Roosevelt did. Here in this New Testament, it says, "May the Lord be with you" on the front. Inside at the top, it says, "The White House, Washington. As Commander-in-Chief, I take pleasure in commending the reading of the Bible to all who serve in the armed forces of the United States. Throughout the centuries, men of many faiths and diverse origins have found in the sacred book words of wisdom, counsel, and inspiration. It is a fountain of strength and now, as always, an aid in attaining the highest aspirations of the human soul," signed by Franklin D. Roosevelt. I've been trying to find a Bible in recent days that has an inscription or signature from the current Commander-in-Chief, who has said he takes such great inspiration from Franklin Roosevelt. And instead, not only do we not find Bibles being encouraged and handed out, we see crosses being taken back, people being told they can't even have their own Bible where people might see it. It is an outrage. And I worry for our nation, just as George Washington did. How can we expect God to bless a nation that is not being allowed to even praise God publicly in our military? It is a sad day, but what's more, if George Washington is right, we are stripping our nation of the opportunity to have our military blessed because of what was done in prior militaries that brought about blessings. Even if you don't believe in God whatsoever, why wouldn't you want to at least have an insurance policy that maybe the reason they were blessed was because of things like this done for our military, in our military, signed by the President of the United States. Obviously, this is a stamp of the President's signature. But again, I appreciate my friend from Missouri, hashtag military freedom. We encourage people, Mr. Speaker, to utilize that to get us information, because we want to help our military protect us. And I thank so much Ms. Hartzler for this effort and for this hour, and encourage all of our colleagues, Mr. Speaker, to stand up for what's right for our military, their freedom of religion. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate you bringing your Bible and sharing that story. I think that really brings home how things have changed and how we need to go back to having an administration and a Department of Defense that protects and preserves and promotes the exercise of religion among our troops for their protection and blessing of not only them but our country. Now I'd like to turn to my friend from Illinois, just a little ways to the east here, Randy Holtgren, to share on this important topic.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Congresswoman Hartzler, for putting this together. I appreciate your important work on this. This is such an important subject for us to be talking about. I rise tonight troubled by what appears to be growing attacks on the religious freedom of those serving in our military. Our great nation, as you all know, is founded on the principle that all men and women have a natural right to freely practice their respective faiths. And these rights extend equally to the brave men and women who serve in our armed forces. Our founding documents were written with express purpose of protecting the inalienable rights of American citizens, including that of religious liberties. The First Amendment states, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. In 1785, the father of the Constitution, James Madison, said, the religion then of every man must be left to the conviction and conscience of every man. And it is the right of every man to exercise it as these may dictate. He recognized that one's faith contains dictates that, barring harm to others, demand obedience from adherents. And obedience not only through thought and behavior, but also by speech and action as well. An individual's faith is inseparable from the way in which he or she lives and acts. If the federal government would curtail the religious speech and action of military members, they would be clearly overstepping the bounds of the Constitution. Unfortunately, over the past several years, a string of aggressive government actions has chilled the religious practice of members of our armed forces. These soldiers defend our freedoms abroad, but did not expect to lose those freedoms at home. Earlier this year, an officer in the Air Force was asked to remove the Bible he kept on his desk. He was told his displaying his Bible made others uncomfortable, and that he could, as a superior, be seen as forcing his religion on others. Does this mean that President Obama forced his religion on others when he put his hand on President Lincoln's Bible as he swore an oath of office on Inauguration Day? When did freedom for religion become conflated with freedom from religion? While attempting to avoid elevating one faith above the rest, an admirable goal, the government has stifled all religion. The so-called protection from religious expression extends further into service members' personal lives. An Army chaplain's assistant was reprimanded for expressing her views, informed by her faith, regarding human sexuality on her own private Facebook profile. Her post was created in her free time and was only visible to her friends and family. Yet once the post was discovered, a superior demanded she remove it or potentially face disciplinary action, including loss of rank and pay. She eventually was forced to acquiesce and remove the post. These are not isolated incidents, but reflect an institution-wide problem. Take, for example, a memo released September 14, 2011 to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. Here's an excerpt from a section regarding visits by religious leaders. It said, no religious items, for example, Bibles, reading material, and/or artifacts, are allowed to be given away or used during a visit. So the memo prevented priests visiting an ailing parishioner from bringing his Bible or an imam his Quran with them to the hospital. This sparked a national outcry, and the memo was quickly rescinded under the claim that it was an accident. So the memo was accidental. But what about military briefings? Are they accidental as well? Last month, several dozen U.S. Army active and reserve troops were advised to treat the American Family Association as a hate group. Apparently, the Christian ministry's support for traditional marriage was enough for the instructor to slap on the hate group label. Fortunately, again, under public pressure, the Pentagon later retracted the label. Similarly, at West Point think tank released a report at the beginning of the year labeling far-right conservative groups, specifically those holding pro-life values, as extremists and domestic terrorists. Because a few radical and disturbed activists have used violence to further their cause, the report lumped in everyone who believed in the sanctity of all life as terrorists. It's dangerous and disingenuous to paint with such broad strokes, blaming entire groups for the terrible actions of a few individuals. These stories are just a few examples of rising sentiment that attacks the expression of religion in our military first, and then asks questions later. Taken individually, these incidents are cause for concern. Taken together, we must wonder whether this widespread activity is more than just coincidence. We must also wonder why a distinguished institution has taken a political position in opposition in opposing those who have long championed the very values the military purports to uphold. Soldiers are being told with more frequency that religion has no place in the military. And if they hope to rise in the ranks or escape punishment, they must leave their faith at the door. The military is unique in its power to make broad demands over individual service members, demands that can't be made over civilians. No one should be forced to choose between service to country and his or her faith. And we must ensure that men and women in uniform have the ability to practice that faith without fear of reprimand. The First Amendment secures the freedom of religious expression for all Americans, including those who protect our freedoms. How could we allow this liberty to be stripped away from our soldiers, our sailors, our pilots? Our brothers, sisters, mothers, and fathers in armed forces all deserve the same rights and liberties that we enjoy, the very ones that they fought to protect. Let's defend them at home as they defend us abroad. Again, thank you, Congressman Hartzler, for doing this, and I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Hultgren, and I think that's a very good point, that we should defend their rights as they're defending us. And I'm looking forward and very much appreciate my colleague from Michigan who's here tonight as well, because he has put his life on the line, starting after high school, going to serve in Vietnam. I believe you were an infantry rifleman to start off with, and then ended up all the way serving with the military police over in Iraq. So first of all, thank you for your service. Thank you for what you're doing to defend freedoms, even today, as we talk about this important issue. So I yield time to you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the gentlewoman from Missouri for the opportunity to speak on this important topic. Mr. Speaker, a few months ago, I read a report that really bothered me. The story said that Army briefs labeled evangelical Christians and Catholics as extremists. That really disturbs me, and it should disturb everyone in this room. In fact, everyone in this country. We have to remember that the men and women in our armed forces represent a microcosm of America. Although they have a variety of beliefs, they work together to defend us. On the battlefield, the enemy doesn't care what you look like or what God you worship. I serve God and country in that order, as did many of my fellow soldiers. It was the greatest honor of my life to serve my country. First as an infantryman, as she said, and later in the Michigan Army National Guard for more than 20 years. I can say, without a doubt, that the soldiers I served with represented the best America had to offer. That is still true today as well. Millions of them are Christians. It is wrong and disrespectful to equate those who believe in traditional values with members of a hate group. Our military should grant mutual respect to everyone in the armed services, because that diversity is what makes America great. And before I close, I'd like to remind everyone about that famous prayer that was addressed or mentioned in the gentleman from Texas speech. A great general said, before the soldiers embarked on that great battle on D-Day, "Good luck, and let us all beseech the blessings of Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking." General Dwight Eisenhower. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, gentlemen. Now, we have another friend from California here, Representative Doug LaMalfa, and we are so glad that he's here and want to yield time to you to hear what your thoughts are on this very important topic of religious freedom in our military.
Well, thank you, Ms. Hartzler. I really appreciate you leading the charge on this very important issue that's probably not going noticed by a lot of Americans these days, but is certainly being noticed by those members of the military that wish to express their religious freedoms as they see fit. Indeed, that was really one of the cornerstone issues of the founders, several items. On taxation, of course, on private property and private property rights, and very importantly, the ability for Americans in the new country to express their religious views as they see fit, to have the freedom to do that. So it's rather amazing and certainly appalling that in our own military we see this going on, where those rights are being suppressed. That especially what we're hearing tonight with some of my previous colleagues' speeches about Christianity. Having a Bible on a desk somehow is a problem for somebody? How have we gotten to this point here? How can people be labeled somehow as part of a terrorist organization when actually these are peaceful enterprises where you're trying to bring people together under the grace of God? I have in my Washington, D.C. office and one of my district offices this portrait here of General Washington as a reminder, as a way for me to continue to seek humility myself. General Washington, Valley Forge, what a man of principle, of humility, of grace. This picture captures so much, that he knew that it was important that he bow to God in this thing. And it certainly served him well and served the founding of this country at a very perilous time where the fledgling Revolutionary War was in great peril going either way at the time. And he is an example for all of us back then and now. You couldn't find a better one. That's why I like that portrait so much, and we're glad you brought it here tonight. So the reasons as put by the founders for our religious freedom have been mentioned here. It is a right guaranteed by the First Amendment. Those who are willing to lay down their lives for us fought for that, for all of us Americans, and should be guaranteed this right without any questions asked. So I feel it's a duty of me as one member of Congress and my colleagues here tonight in speaking about this, to work, to fight, to uphold that right Who has taken over in our military that thinks that this is acceptable to suppress this freedom of expression of religion? I don't understand it. So we're here to protect those service members as well and that ability to have that freedom. We know the chaplaincy was formed in 1775 at the behest of General Washington, who knew and acknowledged at that time how important religious freedom was to our soldiers. These chaplains exist to facilitate the free exercise of religion under the First Amendment for service members, and they faithfully administer to service members of all faiths or of no faith. And I think that's a key thing to mention here. You know, we've all heard about the story mentioned earlier too as well, but there's no atheists in foxholes. You may have heard that phrase. It goes back to a story by Father Cummings, who was a civilian Catholic priest in the Philippines. The phrase was coined during the Japanese attack at Corregidor. During the siege, Cummings had noticed non-Catholics were attending his services. Some he knew were not Catholics, some were not religious, some were even known atheists. Crisis brings out a desire for something greater than ourselves and a need to look within or above. With the pending surrender of Allied forces to the Japanese, Cummings began calming men down by reciting the Lord's Prayer and offering up prayers on their behalf. He then uttered the famous phrase, "There is no such thing as an atheist in a foxhole." Well, we know there is all different types of religions in this nation and people that practice no religion. They choose to have their own way of looking at things. And we embrace all that. Everybody has that right. Everybody has that ability. So atheists are still allowed to be atheists, but to have a group of people dictate to everybody else. How many times have we seen these battles where a high school graduation, somebody wants to sue to stop a prayer, or a nativity scene? You know, if you don't like it, don't pay attention to it, because the rest of us sure see a lot of offensive things in TV and commercials and the T-shirts people wear, even people's hygiene, and we don't go around being able to stop them from expressing themselves that way. So it certainly goes against the founding of this country to be oppressing people's religious views there. And indeed, it is contributing to, I think, a breaking down of our military and its strength to have this kind of oppression going on. So being able to join Mrs. Hartzler tonight here and my other colleagues in pointing this out to the American public and then doing something about it here in these halls of Congress is a necessary thing. I thank my colleague for bringing this tonight and allowing me to speak.
Yes.
I yield back.
Well, thank you, friend, and thank you for your kind words expressing how important it is that we stand strong for our military. And we want our military to be strong, and their ability to be able to pray and to hold on to their faith, to express their faith, is what makes them strong, is part of it, so we don't want to undermine that. Thank you for those words. Now I'd like to turn to Representative Alan Nunley from Mississippi's 1st District to hear his thoughts on this. I want to thank him for his letter that he authored to the Secretary of the Army that got a very positive response, so thank you for your leadership.
Well, thank you, Congressman Hartzler. I do appreciate your leadership in this area. You know, when the framers of our Constitution put together this government and submitted it to the people, the American people looked at it and said, you did a good job, but it's not perfect. There's something that's missing, and that something is a Bill of Rights guaranteeing individual freedoms for all Americans. And so those 10 planks were constructed and added as part of the ratification process. I'm convinced that if those 10 planks had not been added, the Constitution never would have been ratified. I do not believe it is insignificant that the first sentence of the First Amendment guarantees freedom of religion. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And our men and women in the military take an oath of office to support and defend that very Constitution. But they do not surrender that First Amendment right immediately when they put on a uniform. The trend of military instructors and officers portraying Christians of socially conservative and nonprofit organizations as, quote, extremists and a potential threat to our nation is unconscionable. Recently, they labeled the American Family Association, a group in my district that by their very name indicates they are committed to the preservation of the American family. And the fact they're labeled as an extremist organization is unbelievable. These developments are part of what appears to be a mounting culture of religious intolerance and hostility towards Christians within the military. I do not believe that adequate steps have been taken to address the root cause of these incidents, and that's why I put together the letter that Ms. Hartzler referred to the Secretary of the Army, along with a number of my colleagues, to communicate our concerns regarding these developments and ask for the details on what the Army is doing to foster a culture of religious liberty among our men and women in the military. While our founding fathers prohibited the establishment of a state religion, they purposefully did not restrict references to God or personal beliefs in civic dialogue, military service, or everyday life. Mr. Speaker, the dais on which you sit and over which you preside this great house has behind it the American flag. Above that flag are the 4 words of our national motto, "In God we trust." Congress has a responsibility to fight attempts within our military to restrict religious liberty of those who serve our nation and to work to safeguard their freedoms. It's intolerable for those brave men and women serving our country to be denied these very freedoms they're putting their lives on the line to defend. Madam Speaker, I yield back.
Thank you very much for your leadership on that and bring up those excellent points. Now I'd like to turn to my friend from Kansas, from the West, Tim Huelskamp, to share his thoughts on this important topic, military religious freedom.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I appreciate your leadership on this topic. It is so essential, not just to our brave men and women serving the military, but our foundation as a nation. I would like to identify 2 stories that have occurred in the last month and a half in the military, very troubling. During the government slowdown in October, the administration, as was reported in some parts of the media, required all chapels that were serviced by contract chaplains to be closed. In particular, I visited with Father Ray Leonard, who served a naval base in South Carolina. He was not informed ahead of time. He showed up for Saturday evening Mass to a locked door at the chapel. Door locked. Said, "Come back." Shut down. Go away. And people from his congregation were pouring in to the parking lot and were forbidden. A locked door, not allowed to enter. He said, "I'd like to volunteer. I'd like to do it for free. I don't want to be paid. I want to say Mass." The government said no. Father Ray Leonard had a long history. He just had come back from serving as a missionary for 10 years in China. His words were, "I expected that in China. I expected a locked church door in China, but not in America, not on a military base." The Department of Defense decided they were going to punish men and women of faith by locking those doors. Another case of a chaplain in Texas. On the first day of the government slowdown, he was ordered come to the office. By 10 o'clock, his BlackBerry was taken from him. All his contact information was taken from him. His computer was not allowed to him, and he was forbidden to answer any private calls. He was forbidden to answer emails. He was forbidden to communicate with any of the folks. He's in the middle of counseling of folks suffering PTSD. For the entire shutdown, the government forbade him to serve as a chaplain. It's those kind of things you wonder what they're thinking at the Department of Defense in this administration. Because as James Madison wrote, he said, "Conscience is the most sacred of all property. But if you refuse access to chaplains, the folks that are putting their lives on the line." I was in the White House in April, in which the Congressional Medal of Honor was granted to Father Emil Capon from Kansas. and Father Emil. The President talked about his great history of how he inspired Catholics and Protestants and Jews and Muslims at that death camp. And he received an award and a tremendous honor. He was a tremendous man, a tremendous leader, but he is the very type of person that I believe today would not be allowed to serve in our U.S. military. That's a shame, but most devastating, it's not just a shame, it's a loss to the men and women who are looking for that type of support, that type of encouragement, that type of inspiration. This was a nation founded with his blessings. And then we turn around and lock the church door. We turn around and kick chaplains out who actually have views that differ with the administration. This is an attack on religious liberty in the military. Who will be there to defend the religious liberty of our members of the armed services? We're there, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. We started off with a poster of George Washington praying at Valley Forge. We've come a long ways in this country. You've heard the stories tonight of how that freedom to express that religion is under attack. It's time for the pattern of intimidation and intolerance and coercion to stop. It's time to preserve and defend religious freedom to keep America strong, keep our armed services strong. And Mr. Speaker, with that, I yield back.
The gentlewoman yields back. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2013, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Rohrabacher, for 30 minutes.
Thank you very much, and I first would like to associate myself with the remarks of my colleagues that I've just heard. And the struggle for freedom is a continuing struggle that started back with our founding fathers and will not end with us. Every generation has to pick up the torch, or the light of liberty and justice will be extinguished, and it will never be returned. And Reagan always told us, it just takes one generation not to do their job, and we will have lost our freedom forever. Tonight I would like to talk about a very significant part of our freedom and liberty, and it deals specifically with patents and intellectual property rights. And I know sometimes over the years people, when they hear, oh, someone's going to talk about patent law, there's a big yawn. But this has been a significant part of the success of the United States. Our founding fathers believed that with technology and freedom, and yes, with profit motive, that this was the formula that would uplift humankind, that would make America a great country, in which all of our people benefited from this greatness and the prosperity that we would have here. They believed it so strongly that they wrote into our Constitution a guarantee of the ownership rights of inventors and authors. It is the only place in the body of the Constitution where the word right is used. The rest of the rights that we have just been talking about were part of our, the Bill of Rights. But in the Constitution itself, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8, it states, Congress shall have the power to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries, end of quote. This provision has served America well, leading to a general prosperity that has been the envy of the world. It's led to national security, and it's led to, yes, average people living decent lives. It is an integral part of the individual freedom based on rights that were granted by God that are at the heart of American society. It is the reason we have emerged among all the nations of the world with our people living free and living well. And it is not just something that is tangential. It is at the heart of our system. The right to own one's technology that they invent has catapulted our people, who started out having very poor people along the East Coast, into one of the world's, and yes, the world's greatest power. This provision has served America well, leading to prosperity, national security, and, yes, this average life of our people that we can be proud of. Americans, some people think it's just hard work that has caused this great success of our country. Yes, Americans work hard, but so do other people. Technology has made the difference. Technology multiplies our results of our work of our people and the hard work of our people into prosperity. That is the secret of America's success. It's technology and freedom. And yes, it was our strong patent system that made this difference. We have had a strong patent system since the founding of our country, as I just pointed out. Yet today, multinational corporations run by Americans want to diminish the patent protection that our country has had traditionally. Over the years, we've fought, and I say we've fought, meaning since I have been in Congress for 25 years, we have fought time and again and fought back, sometimes defeating, sometimes having to compromise, but these have been attempts to weaken our patent system. Weaken the patent system, which is the basis of American prosperity. What has been happening over the years, for example, we have had a strong patent system in the United States, but a weak patent system in the rest of the world. That's why they aren't prospering. Their patent systems were set up so that big guys could rob from the little guys. Our patent system was set up as a recognition that the ownership of one's discoveries and creations is a gift from God and can't be stolen by a power grab by a big company. Well, overseas in Japan and in Europe, that just isn't true. They have tried over these last 25 years to harmonize our law with the European law and the Japanese law. They call it harmonizing with the rest of the world. Well, the trouble is, they want our law to be weakened rather than bringing up the other laws from around the world to our standards. For example, up until recently, there's been a little change in this. I managed to fight it back, but they were trying to propose that we have a publishing law for a patent application that they have overseas. What do they have overseas? In Japan and in Europe, someone files for a patent, and if the patent hasn't been issued within 18 months, the patent's published. Now, our system in the United States has been the opposite. You file for a patent, and it has been against the law for anyone to even indicate what's in that patent application until the patent is issued. And if it takes a year, 2 years, 10 years because it's such a complicated issue, well, however long it takes, traditionally, our inventors knew that no one was going to get a hold of their patent information until it was handed to them, the patent was granted. And again, in Europe, what they wanted to do, and they tried to do here in this body, but we fought them back, was have that same system. I called it the Steal American Technologies Act, because after 18 months, all of our secrets would have been published even before the patents was issued. Also, we've had a tradition in the United States that you do get a certain time of protection. That's what our Constitution says. Traditionally, it's been 17 years. But that 17 years starts from when you are issued the patent. In Europe, after 20 months, no matter if you've got that patent or not, that clock starts ticking, and by the time you would end up with a patent, if it was a very complicated, high-tech patent, sometimes you've lost, all but a year, maybe even all of your time in order to enjoy the rights and the rewards of having invented something. Under our system, again, once that clock starts, but it only starts after you've been issued your patent, and then you get 17 years of guaranteed time. These people in these big major corporations were trying to change that. They were trying to emasculate the rights of American inventors, saying, we need to harmonize with the rest of the world. Who would be doing such a thing, and why would they be doing it? The reason they were doing it is they want to steal from the American inventor the same way these big boys have been stealing from people in Europe and in Japan and inventors throughout the world. Well, let me once again note that for 25 years I have been finding myself fighting for the small inventors, struggling to defend the patent rights for these young, and maybe not young, maybe just people who are middle-aged and old as well, but people who are not people who have means, but people who have ideas, people who are creative, people who come up with the breakthroughs that have changed our way of life. Milo Farnsworth has a statue here, a man in Utah who invented the picture tube. RCA didn't invent it. RCA tried to steal it from him. And here's one man fought this all the way to the Supreme Court. And you know what? The Supreme Court sided with this one lower-income individual who, I might add, had to enlist people to invest in his court case against RCA in order to fight that case to the Supreme Court. And there is a statue in our Congress to Milo Farnsworth, the inventor. There's no statue to Mr. Sarnoff, who headed RCA and tried to steal that from him, knowing that he was stealing somebody else's invention so he wouldn't have to give credit to this hick from Utah. Well, supposedly there's always been some excuse that there's been used by these corporations, these multinational, not just national corporations, people who have businesses all over the world. Some of them are headed by Americans, some of them not. But even the Americans no longer think they have to watch out for the United States. They're watching out for their global interest of their company. Well, they have to have some reason, some excuse of why to take away or diminish the patent rights of our own people and to harmonize it with somebody else. Well, in the past, they have used the excuse of the submarine patenter. This is just one of the derogatory terms that they came up with in order to justify the fact that they were diminishing the property rights of our intellectual inventors and those people who are coming up with our new technology. And they come up with these derogatory terms, and it sounds good. These big companies have big PR firms in order to come up with a term that will then can be used as just sort of an excuse, a cliche, to say yes to diminishing America's patent protection for the little guys. Well, I mean, because after all, who would support these big multinational corporations if they said, we just want to take anything these people invent and give them whatever we want to give them, or not give them anything. We want to have the right to steal from them, and that's why we're trying to change the rules. They would never get anywhere. Instead, oh, business is being treated unfairly by submarine patenters. That's what they used before, and now they have a new term. Now, this wave, this onslaught, and as I say, we've been facing this wave after wave for 20 years. They keep coming back, trying to diminish our patent structure. Now they insist we need patent change because of the threat of the so-called patent troll. Not to be mistaken with submarine patenter, that was the last one, and there will always be some, as I say, pejorative word that their PR firm, which they pay a lot of money to, can come up with that seems to be sinister enough to scare the American people into emasculating our patent system and letting the big guys steal the ideas from the little guys. These so-called patent trolls are actually patent holders or companies who represent patent holders. They either are people they themselves invented patents, or they represent the companies who actually have bought into patents, who represent the patent holders themselves. They are engaged basically in defending the rights of patent rights against the infringement of those rights of the patents they own. Their patents are no different than anybody else's patents. They call them patent trolls, but what we've got here is just people who are engaged in the business of enforcing patents that are not being enforced. And they basically are seeking to protect some little guys who don't have the money, or to see that they can join in partnership with people in order to maximize their benefit from the patents in which these people hold. They are valid patents. We're not talking, there's all this innuendo, again, sinister thoughts and sinister phrases coming out to make it sound like we're not talking about real legitimate patents. We're talking about people who have invented legitimate patents that have been granted by the Patent Office. And we're also talking about huge corporate infringers that would have us believe that those patents are unfair and evil because trolls, patent trolls, are involved. So what makes the difference between the good patents owned by large corporations themselves? These corporations we're talking about do own patents, and quite frankly, quite often go and try to enforce other patents that they have accumulated and bought. What makes them so different from the patent trolls? Well, the patent troll has been identified as someone who's out for profit from technology that he or she did not invent. Oh my goodness! You've got somebody who didn't invent something and they want to make some money out of it by investing or joining a partnership with somebody who did invent it. That is not something as sinister as patent troll sounds. And just like lawyers, we know that lawyers can file illegitimate lawsuits and try to get people to settle just because they don't want to go through the procedures. Well, that doesn't mean we should destroy the right of people to sue when they have a legitimate claim because some lawyers go out and misuse the system. That should be up to a judge or a jury, not a restriction on the right of people to file suit in order to protect the rights and to gain compensation if their rights have been violated. If the small inventor doesn't have the resources to enforce his or her patent, an individual or a company can buy those rights. And they can actually buy them just like you'd buy a piece of property. That's what it is, intellectual property. And they can buy these, or they can create a partnership with the inventor, and that means that they can then try to seek a suit or some sort of compensation from those who are infringing on those patents. I have consulted with a number of outside individual inventors and groups, and they have reaffirmed to me that the legislation that is being now proposed by the Judiciary Committee further disadvantages the little guy against the deep-pocketed multinational corporations that are behind the changes that are now being proposed in the United States Congress, which I will detail in a few moments. Yes, they are using the guise of targeting these patent trolls. They hope to achieve a legislation that will prevent little guys from actually selling their product to these big guys, or have a dramatic impact on the ability, or probably more accurately say, it will have a dramatic impact on the ability of people who own patents to actually file suit against those big infringers. And they do this in the name of controlling the patent trolls. And of course, again, I say, what does that mean? That's someone who necessarily has not invented something, but is working with the inventor to see that those rights are respected. So how horrible it is making a business out of helping small inventors or partnering with people in order to see that they have the resources to enforce their patent rights against large corporations mainly, or even if they're medium-sized corporations who are infringing on a patent, meaning they're using this invention, and the inventor comes in and says, well, you're infringing on my patent. Can't you pay me for the rights of using this while I still own it? And the answer is, sue me, because the big corporations know full well, that they are that they have deep pockets and they can handle anything, and the little guy, well, especially if they get this law passed, the little guy is not going to be able to seek help, and it's going to be much more complicated for him. Tonight I draw attention of the American people to H.R. 3309, the Innovative Act, let's see, the Innovation Act, they call it this time, introduced by Chairman Goodlatte with 14 bipartisan co-sponsors. This bill is scheduled to be marked up in the House Judiciary Committee next week, even though the committee has only held one hearing since this bill was introduced, and it was only introduced 8 legislative days ago. So something's being rammed through the process here, big time. People need to see that, and what are they trying to do? Why are they ramming it through? Because this is the multinational corporations who want to diminish the rights of the little guy, and only we, the American people, can stop that with our sense of fairness and our commitment to making sure America remains the technological leader of the world, and that isn't in the hands of these multinational corporations who aren't necessarily in allegiance with the United States. The witnesses from these hearings on this legislation have included former patent director Campos, And he made it clear that we should move slowly and with great care in making the many changes to the patent law that are part of this legislation, especially in light of the fact that no one yet understands the implications of the last patent bill that was passed through Congress during the last Congress. They passed a patent bill called the America Invents Act, which is in the process of being implemented and interpreted by the Patent Office and by the courts. So we haven't digested that last bite the Congress took out of the patent law apple, and now they want us to gobble down a few more. In and of itself, this legislation is too broad, its implications are too unclear, and its impact and effects are unknowable. That's what witnesses and other experts have indicated, and the conclusion is move forward with caution, not ram something through in just a few days. But that's not what's happening. Congress is being railroaded into passing this legislation on top of the last legislation, which we haven't even figured out how it works yet. And now, of course, they've got the patent trolls, in which they're telling us to be afraid of, so we don't have to worry about any of that. Don't think about it. Don't think. Just remember, patent trolls are sinister, and we've got to stop them and pass this bill. That's what most of these people are hearing here in Congress. Congress needs to hear from their own constituents about bills like this. So what's going on? This congressional ramrodding exemplifies the battle to diminish America's patent system, and it's been going on for 25 years, wave after wave of attack on America's patent system. We fought them back most of the time, but this time we could lose, and you lose one, that system's changed forever. According to the co-sponsors of H.R. 3309, it is an attempt to combat this problem of patent trolls, and here it is. Even though the study mandated by Congress in the last patent bill, they mandated this study by Congress, and that study that was mandated by the last law shows that this whole much heralded patent troll problem is not the major driver of lawsuits that we're being told, and has not created a surge of new lawsuits. Most of the provisions of the legislation they will pass through committee next week will make it much more complicated, much more costly, much more challenging to bring a lawsuit for patent infringement. That's what it's all about. They want to make it more difficult to challenge them. Instead, if what we're really talking about are people abusing the patent system in order to abuse these businessmen, we should be instead making it cheaper and simpler and easier to defend against baseless accusations of infringement. We are being asked to raise the bar for an inventor to bring a lawsuit to defend his or her rights, rather than lowering the bar to allow a small business to defend itself against frivolous lawsuits. In addition, the claim of technical correction, under that claim, this legislation proposes to remove the patent system's only independent judicial review process, Section 45 of Title 35. If this passes, inventors who are not satisfied with the Patent Office administrative process will have no recourse, although this safeguard of judicial recourse has been in American law since 1836. This isn't some antiquated process. It is an independent judicial review. And last year, the Supreme Court in Kapos versus Hyatt reaffirmed the importance of having judicial review when you have people in the Patent Office who are defining the property rights of American inventors, something so important to our country. Now, the Patent Office has requested that judicial review be done away with because it is burdensome for them to defend their actions in court. On the rare occasion that this happens, it's burdensome. Well, the Patent Office wants to strip away the rights of Americans because it's inconvenient to the bureaucracy. Boy, here's where we got the bureaucracy and multinational corporations working hand in glove. This legislation going before the Judiciary Committee here in the House next week is consistent with the decades-long war being waged on America's independent inventors. Mr. Speaker, how many minutes do I have left?
Has approximately 7 minutes.
Have 7 minutes?
Gentleman yield to the gentleman from Texas and maintain his time.
Yes, I will.
What purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I send to the desk a privileged report from the Committee on Rules for filing under the rule.
The clerk report the title.
Report to accompany House Resolution 413, resolution providing for consideration of the Bill H.R. 3350 to authorize health insurance insurers to continue to offer for sale current individual health insurance coverage in satisfaction of the minimum essential health insurance coverage requirement and for other purposes.
Proceeding is referred to the House calendar and ordered printed. The gentleman from California is recognized for his full 7 minutes.
All right, thank you very much. Here are some of the sections of that bill that I've been talking about, H.R. 3309, which will be going through the Judiciary Committee next week, and how it undermines America's patent system and patent rights of the little guy and opens up power grabs by the multinational corporations, which is something we've been experiencing for the last 25 years and have had to beat back every time. Well, here we go. Here's some provisions of this bill. H.R. 3309 creates additional information requirements, which means when you're filing a legal case for infringement, it's going to cost you a lot more. There's more paperwork, and thus a more potential for a dismissal of the case just on a technicality. More paperwork means a higher cost, more likely to have the case thrown out on a technicality, which then increases, not decreases, the chances of small patent holders being infringed. And this bill also switches to loser pays. And of course, loser pays sounds like a good idea, but when you talk about this in terms of patent rights, what we've got is these huge corporations who got deep pockets, and if you end up having loser pays, the little guy knows for him to actually try to have a loser pay means that you have that this big corporation can put massive expenses onto their defense where you have only smaller amount that's available, so you are then put in great disadvantage. We are, again, making the little guy, putting him at the disadvantage of these big multinational corporations. H.R. 3309 adds a new dimension to this loser pays. It allows the court to bring others into the case involuntarily as a plaintiff. Now, get this, if they have an interest in the patent, they make them liable for the cost. So if you have somebody like Milo Farnsworth whose patent was stolen, whose idea was stolen, anybody who would invest in his lawsuit, which is what he had to do in order to take it all the way to the Supreme Court, and God bless the Supreme Court of the United States and the United States of America that we have a court that sided with this little guy, but now they want to change that so the Milo Farnsworths can't get people to invest in their suit, because at that point they then are liable for the court cost of the big corporation that's being taken on. This is so broad that people can be made part of an infringement case even if their interest in the patent is just legal or innocent, such as those who have licensed the patent. This, combined with loser pay provision, means that if the patent holder loses the infringement suit, anyone who has done business with him may lose or be held financially liable. What a disincentive for people to support the efforts of small inventors. This is absurd, but yet this is what's going to be going through the Judiciary Committee next week, just like they've tried to push this on us for 25 years, and the players behind this are big multinational corporations trying to steal the technology that has been invented by America's small inventors. H.R. 3309 allows the courts to limit discovery until clarifying the patent and infringement claim. What does that mean? The case will take longer and thus cost more. The transparency of patent ownership, and as once filing a claim for infringement, a patent holder must, according to the provisions of this proposed legislation, provide information about all parties with an interest in the patent to the Patent Office and to the accused infringer. As a result, we have an elimination of privacy in these business dealings. The little guy is totally exposed, as are his friends. Here again, we're trying to do everything we can, and this legislation is trying to do everything that it can to try to get people not to support the little inventor. Don't get on his side. Don't give him any strength to enforce his rights because he invented something that now some multinational corporation has stolen and wants to, what? Wants to manufacture it in China. Well, once again, this requirement has been invoked. The patent holder must maintain a current, here it comes, the patent holder will also have to maintain a current record of information on file in the Patent Office. Thus we have, again, bureaucratic reporting requirements for these little inventors. That's to a big corporation means nothing. To a small inventor, it means all of his time, all of his resources, and if indeed they do not report, if this is, let's put it this way, those dramatically increases the vulnerability. Oh yeah, if this is, if he doesn't report it right, he could lose the intellectual property rights he's trying to protect. In addition, the patent holder would be forced to pay record-keeping fees to maintain a current record at the Patent Office. There we have bureaucratic fees all aimed at the little guy because the big guys can afford this. They got people on the payroll. They got lawyers on the payroll. Then we have the customer suit exemption. This section appears to remove all the current of Section 296 of Title 35, which specifically allows, here it goes, this is really significant, this allows inventors to sue governments who infringe on their patents. What we're talking about here is if a government steals a person's intellectual property, that it permits them to get away with it. This emasculates the right of the American inventor, American people, to hold their government accountable if the government steals their technology. This is totally contrary to American tradition. Limits of discovery in a court case, unless the judgment determines necessary and appropriate. Again, an infringer, and this is Section 6 of H.R. 3309, an infringer, especially big ones like large multinational corporations, may make an infringement paper trail. Oh, yeah. This requires a paper trail, what we're saying here, this section, that is so broad and so diverse that a plaintiff will have to ask repeatedly for discovery. I would...
The gentleman's time has expired. And under this...
Virginia...
Well,
yes.
If the gentleman will hold.